There is nothing you need to do right now, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to solve, nothing waiting for your attention on the other side of this moment. Whatever the day held, the weight of it, the noise of it, the thousand small negotiations it asked of you, you can set all of that down now, gently, the way you might set down something you've been carrying for a long time without realizing it. Find a position that feels easy on your body. Let your shoulders drop if they've been holding. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands open a little, just a little, so your palms face upward or rest loosely against whatever is beneath them. There is no correct way to do this. There is only the slow, natural settling of a body that has earned its rest. Take one breath that is a little deeper than usual. Let it move all the way down, the way a stone moves through still water, unhurried, tracing a clean path. And then let it go. Let it go the way the last light leaves a room at the end of the day, gradually, without drama, until the darkness is complete and comfortable. In a few moments, you will begin to move through a place that exists in the quiet hours. A place built for preservation, for patience, for the kind of attention that asks nothing urgent of you. A place where every sound is softer than a whisper, where every light is warm and amber and lit by hand, where the floor sways almost imperceptibly beneath your feet, like a very gentle pendulum finding its rhythm. You do not need to hold on to anything as we go. You do not need to memorize the corridors or remember the names of things. You only need to follow and breathe and let the warmth of the lamps come to you one by one. When you are ready, and you are already ready, let your eyes close the rest of the way and step inside. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not an unpleasant cold, not the sharp, biting cold of a winter street, nothing that startles or contracts, but the clean, mineral cold of stone and open air, the kind of cold that has been here for a very long time and has settled into something almost comfortable. It arrives first at the back of your hands, then at the bridge of your nose, and then at the small exposed strip of skin at the back of your neck. And you find that it does not bother you. It is simply part of being here, the way the cold of a cellar is part of the cellar, inseparable from the stillness, inseparable from the dark. You are standing at the entrance to the suspended archive. The door through which you have come is made of iron and glass, set into a frame of pale stone, and it opens onto a corridor that stretches ahead of you into a darkness that is not quite complete. Far down the corridor, very far, farther than you might expect, there are small points of light, amber and warm, like embers that have not yet been disturbed. They hang in the dark at irregular intervals, and you understand, looking at them, that they are the lamps already lit, the ones Solen reached first, before you arrived. The floor beneath your feet is made of planks, wide, pale planks of some wood that has been worn smooth by decades of careful footsteps, and when you take your first step forward, you feel it. The sway. It is so subtle that you might, in another context, mistake it for your own body shifting its weight. But it is not that. It is the archive itself, suspended between its two great cliff faces by a lattice of bronze cables, moving as the wind moves, obeying the slow breath of the gorge below. It sways forward by the smallest degree, and then back, and then forward again, a pendulum so long and slow that its period is almost that of a resting heartbeat. You feel it in your ankles, in the soft bend of your knees, in the gentle redistribution of your weight from heel to toe and back again. It is not alarming. After a few steps, it begins to feel like something you have always known, the rhythm of a body at rest, of a boat on still water, of breathing in and breathing out. metallic first, the particular smell of old metal, of brass fittings and lacquered iron shelving, and the faint oxidation of 1,000 sealed canisters lining the walls on either side of you. Beneath the metal, there is candle wax, warm and slightly sweet, the smell of something recently lit, of a flame that has just taken hold. And beneath that, something harder to name, a kind of compressed age, the smell of time held still, of sounds preserved in glass and tin the way other archives preserve paper and ink. You breathe it in slowly, and it settles into you, and you find it is not unpleasant. It is the smell of a place that takes its work seriously, that has been doing its work for a very long time, and will continue long after tonight. The shelves rise on either side of you from floor to ceiling, and the ceiling is high, much higher than you expected, lost somewhere in a darkness that the lamplight does not quite reach. The canisters on the shelves are of varying sizes, some no larger than a jar of preserved fruit, some as wide and deep as a hat box, some cylindrical and tall as a rolled map. Each one is labeled in a small, careful hand, ink on paper, paper affixed to the canister with a strip of dark adhesive. You do not stop to read the labels yet. You are following Solen. He is perhaps 30 feet ahead of you, moving with the deliberate, unhurried pace of someone who has made this walk so many times that his feet know where to go before his mind directs them. He is a compact man, dressed in a long coat of dark wool that reaches nearly to his ankles, and he carries in his right hand a lighting wand, a slender brass rod with a small oil-soaked wick at its tip, already burning with a flame so steady it seems barely to flicker even as he walks. In his left hand, he holds a lamp handle, a loop of heavy brass, warm from having already passed through several lit lamps this evening, and you can see the faint impression of it in the way he holds his arm, the slight favoring of a hand that has held that weight 1,000 nights before. He does not speak. This is not unusual. In the archive, no one speaks above a whisper. This is the rule, simple and absolute, and it is honored not out of obligation, but out of a kind of natural reverence, the way people lower their voices in old buildings without being asked. Solen simply moves, and you follow, and the corridor sways beneath you both, and the cables, the great bronze cables that hold this entire structure suspended between the cliffs, hum. The hum is the other thing. You have been aware of it since you stepped inside, but it took a moment to identify because it is so low and so constant that it sits at the very edge of what you would call a sound. It is almost more of a feeling than a sound, a vibration that you receive not just through your ears but through the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands when you let them rest lightly against a shelf. It is a single note, deep and even, the note of a string drawn very taut by a very great tension, the note of the cables themselves, singing in the wind that moves through the gorge below. It does not change. It does not rise or fall. It simply continues, the way a river continues, the way the dark continues, the way a very old building continues to stand because standing is simply what it does. You follow Solen deeper into the first corridor. The amber light ahead grows warmer as you walk, and the darkness behind you closes in, and the floor sways its slow, even sway, and the cables hum their single patient note, and the cold from the iron grate windows set high in the cliff-facing walls moves across you in a slow tide, in and then past you, in and then past you. And somewhere, very faintly, from somewhere deep in the shelves to your left, you hear something. It is rain. Not real rain, not rain falling in this place, not rain on the stone of the cliffs or on the bronze cables. It is the sound of rain on a tin roof, and it is coming from a canister on the third shelf, where a seal has loosened slightly, where a glass stopper has shifted by a millimeter over the years, and the sound preserved inside is breathing out, slowly and almost imperceptibly, into the air of the corridor. You stop. You stand very still and listen. It is the most particular sound, not a general rain, not the idea of rain, but a specific rain falling on a specific tin roof somewhere that no longer exists. You can hear the irregularity of it, the way some drops are heavier than others, the way there is a brief hesitation and then a rush, and then the sound settles back into its long, even patter. And there is a gutter somewhere in that sound, a gutter that the rain is filling and beginning to overflow, and there is the muffled resonance of the space beneath the roof, a small space, a room or a workshop or a storage shed, the kind of place where someone might have sat and listened to this same rain without knowing they were being listened to, without knowing that this sound would one day be collected and sealed and placed on a shelf in an archive suspended between two cliffs. Solen has paused ahead of you. He has turned slightly, not to look at you, but to listen. Even after all his years in the archive, he still pauses for this one. You can see it in the slight tilt of his head, the way his lighting wand rests easy at his side for a moment. And then he turns back and continues walking, and you follow, and the sound of the rain fades slowly behind you as you move down the corridor, not stopping suddenly, but diminishing the way all sounds diminish with distance, growing thinner and softer until it is indistinguishable from the hum of the cables, and then gone. The first lamp that Solen lights in your presence is at the junction of two corridors, a place where the main aisle branches into a narrower one that leads away into a dimness full of shelves. The lamp here is mounted on a tall iron post, and its glass is amber, a deep, warm amber, the color of late afternoon in autumn, the color of honey held up to sunlight. The glass is cold and slightly damp from the cliff air, and Solen lifts his wand and touches the flame to the wick inside, and the lamp takes the light the way a good lamp always does, not with a flare, not with a sputter, but with a slow, steady brightening, as though the light has always been there and is only now choosing to be seen. The pool of amber spreads across the floor, across the lacquered shelves, across the rows of labeled canisters. It catches the brass fittings and turns them gold. It catches the edges of the paper labels and softens them. It reaches the far wall of the junction and rests there warm and still. Solen checks the glass stopper of a canister nearest the lamp, a small habitual motion, a single tap of his fingertip against the stopper to confirm it is seated properly. It is. He moves on. You linger for a moment in the new warmth of the lamp. The smell of candle wax is stronger here, fresh and slightly sweet, overlaying the metallic coolness of the canisters. You breathe it in and feel something in your chest ease, some small tightness you had not noticed until it released, the way you do not notice a sound until it stops. The floor sways beneath you. The cables hum. The lamplight holds steady and does not flicker. You follow Solen into the narrower corridor. This aisle is dedicated, you begin to understand, reading the labels in the amber light as you pass, to architectural sounds, the sounds of buildings. The canisters here are labeled in that same small, careful hand, and the labels read, "The settling of a 4-story timber building in winter cold," and the resonance of a stone corridor in an empty school, and the sound of a specific wooden staircase on a rainy morning, the 3rd step with its characteristic creak. And here, the ambient hum of a demolished mill, the way the machinery and the walls and the air itself had all vibrated together into a single sustained chord that was the voice of that place, preserved now in a canister no wider than a soup tin, its stopper sealed with dark wax. Solen pauses at a lamp halfway down this aisle. He lifts his wand, and the lamp takes the flame, and the amber light spreads in both directions along the shelves of architectural sounds, and for a moment in the new warmth, you can almost hear them through their sealed canisters, not the specific sounds, but the idea of them, the ghost of them, the way you sometimes sense a presence in a room before you see it. You pause at a canister near the middle of the shelf. The label reads, Ambient Resonance of the Bridge Market, South Quarter, 3rd century of the city's construction. The canister is large, nearly the size of a small barrel, and its sides are dented in one place, a shallow dent that speaks of a long-ago collision with something, a dropped crate perhaps, or the jostling of a cart. The stopper is sealed, but you lean close, and in the quietness of the archive, in the space between one sway and the next, you think you can hear something, not clearly, not distinctly, but as a presence, a faint warmth of sound too compressed to escape its container. The sound of a market. The sound of 100 people in a covered space, their voices and their footsteps in the slide of goods across wooden counters and the creak of the bridge beneath them all, compressed into a single sustained hum that is the voice of that place and those people and that particular hour. You stay with it for a long moment. Then you follow Solen. The narrow corridor opens back into a wider one, and here the shelves change character. The canisters in this section are older. You can tell by the different style of their labels, a slightly different hand, the ink a shade more faded, the adhesive crumbling at the edges. Some of these canisters have secondary labels affixed beneath the originals, smaller tags in a newer hand, noting the date of last inspection, the condition of the seal, any notes about loosening or leakage. A few of them have a small red dot, barely the size of a fingernail, pressed in wax at the base of the stopper, indicating that they require attention. Solen notices one of these. He sets his lighting wand carefully against the shelf. It has a small hook at its base for exactly this purpose, and he draws from his coat pocket a small leather roll, which he unfolds to reveal a set of tools, a stopper press, a wax pencil, a strip of dark sealing tape no wider than a finger. He works with the careful attention of someone who has done this 10,000 times, who knows exactly how much pressure to apply, who can feel through his fingertips when the seal is right. His hands move slowly and precisely. The archive sways around him. The cables hum. You watch him work, and there is something deeply restful about it. The sight of someone doing a known task with complete ease, without hurry, without the need for anything to be different than it is. His breathing is steady. His movements are economical. When he is finished, he replaces his tools in the leather roll, tucks it back into his coat pocket, and retrieves his lighting wand from the shelf. He examines the canister one more time, a last quiet look, the way you might look at a door you have just locked before turning away. Then he moves on. The next lamp is at the end of this corridor, where the aisle terminates in a wide window, not a conventional window, but an iron grate set into the cliff face itself, a grid of dark metal bars through which the cold air of the gorge moves freely. Beyond the grate there is almost nothing to see, a darkness that is the darkness of open space, of the gorge dropping away below, of the opposite cliff face somewhere in the distance. But you can feel it, the cold, clean breath of the open air, arriving in pulses as the wind moves through the gorge, carrying with it the mineral smell of wet stone and the faint, distant smell of the river at the bottom. Solen stands for a moment at the great window before lighting this lamp. He does not look out, or rather he looks out in the way of someone who is not seeing but feeling. his face slightly lifted, his eyes half closed, receiving the cold air as it comes through the iron bars. You stand beside him. The cold arrives and moves over you and passes on. The cables, you can see the nearest of them through the grate, a great bronze cable as thick as your arm, running from somewhere below you and up and away into the dark above. The cables hum their single sustained note, and here, beside the grate, the note is slightly louder, slightly warmer in its resonance, and you feel it in your sternum, a low and pleasant vibration. Then Solen lights the lamp. The amber floods the end of the corridor, and the cold air from the grate moves through the lamplight without disturbing it. The flame barely shifts, protected inside its glass housing, and the light catches the bronze cable through the bars and turns it gold, and for a moment the cable seems to glow with its own warmth, the way metal holds heat after the source is gone. You turn and walk back with Solen the way you came, and the lit lamps behind you and the lit lamps ahead of you make the corridor feel different now, less like a passage through darkness and more like a passage through warmth, a sequence of amber pools, each one overlapping slightly with the next, so that there is no true darkness between them, only a gentle dimming, and then a brightening, and then a dimming again, like breathing. You pass back through the junction, and Solen leads you now into a section of the archive you have not yet seen, a section that extends out over the gorge, supported by the outermost cables, and in which the sway is more pronounced. Not dramatically more, you are not unsteady, you do not need to hold the shelves, but noticeably more, a deeper and slower motion, a longer pendulum, a breath that takes a little more time to complete. You adjust to it in a few steps, your body finding the rhythm as a body always finds a rhythm when given sufficient time. The canisters in this section are different in character again. These are the birdsong canisters. The labels here carry names, not places, but names of birds, written in both common and formal language, and beside the names, in brackets, the notation, last recorded, and a date. Some of the dates are recent, in the reckoning of an archive that measures its age in centuries. Some are older than that, older than the archive itself, which means they were collected elsewhere and transferred here for preservation, arriving from other places, other collectors, other custodians who understood what was being lost and wanted to ensure it was not entirely lost. You slow as you walk through this section. One canister catches your eye. It is a small one, barely larger than a teacup, and its label is older than the others, the paper yellowed, the ink faded to the color of old tea. Beside the formal name of the bird is a common name that no one uses anymore, a name in a dialect that has itself largely vanished. The date reads simply, "Before the building of the eastern roads," which tells you nothing precisely, but tells you something deeply, that this sound is very old, older than the roads, older than the people who built them, older than the maps that show them. You lean close to this canister. The stopper is sealed with many layers of dark wax, the wax of successive inspections, each one adding a thin layer over the last, so that the stopper is now encased in a smooth dome of dark preservation. There is no leakage here. This sound is held perfectly. You cannot hear it. But you stay close for a moment anyway, your face near the cool metal of the canister, and in the hum of the cables and the sway of the floor and the amber warmth of the nearest lamp, you imagine it, a bird you have never seen, in a place that no longer exists, making a sound that no living person has heard with their own ears. A sound that exists now only here, in this small container, on this swaying shelf, in this archive suspended between two cliffs in a city built on bridges. Solen has paused ahead of you, and when you look up, you see that he is listening. There is another canister here with a loose seal. You can tell because he has tilted his head in that particular way, the way a person tilts their head when they are trying to hear something at the very edge of audibility. You come to stand beside him, and you listen too. It takes a moment to find, and then you have it. It is a bird song, of course it is, in this section, and it is coming from a canister on the second shelf, a medium-sized one with a label that you cannot quite read from where you are standing. The song is so faint that it is barely there, barely a sound at all, more of a texture in the air than a sound, a series of short, liquid notes, repeated, with a pause between each repetition that is almost exactly as long as the phrase itself. Call and silence. Call and silence. The pattern of a bird singing alone in an empty place, not answering but asserting, I am here, I am here, I am here. You stand with Solen and listen to it for a long time. The archive sways. The cables hum. The amber light holds steady in its glass. And in the bird that has been gone for longer than anyone in this city can remember, the bird whose name is written in a language that is itself nearly gone, sings its 3 liquid notes into the cold air of the corridor, and the sound is so small and so patient that it asks nothing of you except that you be still and hear it. After a while, Solen draws out his leather roll and attends to the seal. He works with the same quiet precision as before, the same careful pressure, the same unhurried movements, the same final look before he puts his tools away. The song fades as the seal is tightened. Not abruptly, it diminishes gradually, the way a sound diminishes when a door is slowly closed until it is simply no longer there. The canister holds it again, completely and safely, and the corridor is quiet except for the hum of the cables and the soft, regular sway of the floor. Solen lights the lamp in this section. It is mounted high near the ceiling, and he must use the extended end of his wand, and the amber light spreads down over the birdsong canisters, warming the metal, softening the old labels, making the domed wax seals glow like small dark jewels. You walk on. The next section of the archive, you have come now through a low doorway, a doorway of pale stone set between iron pillars, into a space that feels different in character from the corridors you have been in. This section is wider and lower ceilinged, and the shelves here do not run in long aisles but in a series of concentric rings, like the rings of a very old tree, each ring slightly lower than the one outside it, so that the center of the space is a shallow depression in the floor. In the center of this depression, there is a chair. It is a plain chair, wooden, with a straight back and no cushion, and it is positioned facing outward so that whoever sits in it can see all of the rings of shelves simultaneously. Solen moves to the outermost ring first, where the lamps are mounted at intervals around the curve, and he lights them one by one, working his way around the ring before moving inward to the next. You follow him at a little distance, watching the amber light build in layers, the outermost ring first, and then the next, and then the next, each new layer of warmth deepening the glow of the ones already lit, so that by the time Solen reaches the innermost ring, the circular space is full of a warm amber light that has no single source, that seems to emanate from all directions equally, like the light inside a lantern. The canisters in the rings are labeled differently from the ones in the corridors. These labels are longer, more discursive, more descriptive, as though the person who wrote them understood that the contents were harder to summarize. One reads, "The sound of a city waking on an ordinary morning, not a significant morning, not a day of ceremony or weather, but a morning in the middle of the longest ordinary stretch of days. when nothing was different from the morning before. Another reads, the quality of silence in a room immediately after a bell has stopped ringing, the resonance of the room itself, the way the walls and the ceiling held the note for a moment after the source was gone. And another, on a large canister with 3 separate seals, the composite sound of all the bridges in this city on a still night in autumn, the cables and the wood and the wind together before the eastern expansion changed the wind patterns. You stand before this last one for a long time. It is the largest canister in this section, and it sits at eye level on the innermost ring, directly across from the plain wooden chair. The 3 seals are intact, each one a different color, dark red, pale gold, and a deep green, applied in 3 different eras of the archive's history by 3 different hands. The canister's sides are smooth and slightly warm, which surprises you, warmer than the others, as though the sound inside it generates a faint heat of its own. You rest your hand against it, and the warmth is real, subtle but present, like the warmth of a stone that has been in sunlight and retained some portion of it through the night. The cables hum outside, and you think, perhaps what you are feeling is not the canister, but simply your own hand, warmed by the amber light of the lamps. Perhaps there is no difference. The Solen has finished lighting this section, and he stands now by the plain wooden chair in the center, and he does something you have not seen him do before. He sits. Just for a moment, not long, not the sitting of someone who is tired, but the brief, deliberate sitting of someone who has earned a moment of stillness in a place they know well. He sets his lighting wand across his knees. He lets his hands rest. He looks around the circular room at the rings of amber-lit shelves, and his expression is one of quiet satisfaction, the satisfaction of a task being done, of a place prepared, of a night that is going as a night should go. You find a place to lean against a shelf, not far from him. The circular room sways. It is more perceptible here, in the center of this section, than in the corridors. The depression in the floor seems to amplify it slightly, the way a bowl amplifies the sound of water poured into it. You feel it in the backs of your legs, in the gentle forward and back of your weight, and it is not unpleasant. It is deeply, specifically pleasant, the way a hammock sways, the way a boat at anchor moves in a harbor, the way the body of a child sways when it has been carried a long distance and is almost asleep. The cables hum. After a while, Solen rises from the chair, takes up his lighting wand, and leads you out of the circular room through a different doorway. Not the one you came through, but one on the opposite side, which opens into a corridor you have not seen. This corridor is narrower than the others, and the shelves here are sealed behind glass doors, small doors, each one fitted with a simple latch, protecting the canisters inside from the worst of the cliff air. You can see the canisters through the glass, and the amber light of the lamps catches the glass and doubles it so that the shelves seem to glow from within. The smell here is less metallic and more waxy, the smell of the sealant that coats the glass doors, something between beeswax and pine resin, warm and slightly sweet. These canisters, you understand, are the most fragile. The sounds inside them are the most delicate, not louder, not rarer necessarily, but preserved at a quality that requires more careful protection. One glass door bears a small placard that reads, "Storm sounds, high altitude, collected by aerial methods," and behind it, a row of canisters that are slightly larger than the others, their stoppers sealed with a wax that has been tinted blue. Another door, interior acoustics of demolished concert halls, and behind it, a series of canisters so carefully arranged that they form a kind of grid, each one labeled with a hall name and a date and a specific frequency range. Solen walks this corridor more slowly than the others. He lights each lamp with the same care, the same steady touch of flame to wick, the same quiet moment of watching the light take hold before moving on. But he also pauses at several of the glass doors, checking the latches, pressing his palm briefly against the glass as if feeling for drafts. His coat makes a soft sound as it moves, the sound of heavy wool against itself, a small and comfortable sound in the quiet of the corridor. You pass a door behind which you notice a single canister sits alone on an otherwise empty shelf. It is a small canister, unremarkable in size or appearance, but it occupies the center of the shelf with a kind of deliberateness, placed, not stored, positioned with care. The label is brief, and you can read it through the glass. The last time this archive was completely silent. You stop. You look at it for a long time. The idea of it, the idea that someone at some point in the archive's long history had recognized the moment of complete silence and had the presence of mind to collect it, to seal it, to place it here for keeping, settles into you with a slow and particular weight. Not a sad weight, a still one. The weight of something understood without needing to be explained. The cables hum outside. The floor sways. You follow Solen on. The corridor ends at a small room, a room that is clearly a working space, not a storage space. And there is a long table here, its surface worn smooth and slightly darker than the surrounding wood from decades of use, and on it there are the tools of the Cataloguers' work, open ledgers with their papery pages, pencils in a wooden holder, a set of magnifying glasses of varying strengths, a small lamp of its own that has not yet been lit. There are several chairs at the table, plain, like the chair in the circular room, and the chairs are pushed in neatly as they are left every morning when the Cataloguers complete their shift and go home to sleep through the day. Solen lights the lamp on the table. He takes particular care with this one. It is the lamp the Cataloguers will work by, the lamp whose light will fall on the ledger pages and the labels and the careful notes made in small handwriting, and so he trims the wick first, a brief and practiced motion before touching his wand to it. The light that comes from it is slightly different from the corridor lamps, a little warmer, a little more golden, the light of a lamp meant for close work, for the reading of fine print. He stands back and looks at the table. Satisfied. You sit in one of the chairs, one of the Cataloguers' chairs, and the seat is smooth beneath you, smooth and slightly cool, and your hands rest on the edge of the table, and the lamplight falls across your hands and warms them, and you can smell the wax of the ledger pages and the faint metallic smell of pencil graphite and the ever-present undertone of the canisters and the cold cliff air and the candle wax of the lamps already lit. The archive sways around you. The cables hum their single patient note. After a while, you hear the first sounds of the night Cataloguers arriving. They come in quietly. Of course they come in quietly. This is the archive. This is the only way anyone moves here, and you hear them not as footsteps, but as a series of small, soft sounds, the click of the outer door, the gentle shift of the floor as weight is redistributed, the sound of a coat being hung on a hook, the small and specific sound of a ledger being set down on a table in another room. Then another arrival, and another, each one adding its small sounds to the quiet of the archive without disturbing it, the way stones dropped into still water add ripples that do not conflict, but expand outward and pass through each other and become, eventually, stillness again. Solen moves through the preparation room, checking the last things. He opens a low cabinet and removes from it a cloth, which he uses to wipe a thin film of condensation from the nearest window grate, a habitual, automatic motion, the motion of someone maintaining a place they love. He checks the oil level in the table lamp, tilting it slightly to see the oil move, confirming there is enough for the full shift. He straightens a ledger that is already straight. Then he moves to the doorway and pauses, looking back at the room. And you understand that this is the moment between the preparation and the work, between the lamplighter's task and the cataloger's task, between the quiet of the unlit archive and the warm, inhabited quiet of the archive at work. The lamps are all lit now. The amber light fills every corridor, every aisle, every ring of shelves, falling across the canisters in their thousands, warming the lacquered wood of the shelves, gleaming on the brass fittings and the glass doors and the dome of the wax seals. The cables hum. The floor sways. The cold air moves through the grates in its slow tide. And now the catalogers are taking their places. You hear them settling, the soft sound of chairs being drawn out, the papery whisper of ledger pages turning, the small click of a pencil being uncapped. They do not speak to each other. In the archive, there is no need. Each one knows their section, their task, their place in the long, unhurried work of preservation. They move through the corridors with small lamps of their own, supplementing Solen's work, bending close to labels and ledger pages and the seals of canisters, writing in their small and careful hands, noting, recording, attending. You remain at the table in the preparation room. There is nothing you need to do. The work is happening around you and without you, and it is enough simply to be here, simply to sit in the warm amber light with your hands on the smooth wood of the table, and the smell of wax and metal in the air, and the sway of the floor beneath you, and the hum of the cables in the soles of your feet. A cataloger passes through the room, a small figure in a dark coat, carrying a ledger, moving with the unhurried precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times. She does not acknowledge you, not because you are invisible, but because acknowledgement in this place is unnecessary. Your presence is known and comfortable, the way the presence of an old piece of furniture is known and comfortable. She pauses at the cabinet, takes out a small tool that you cannot name, and continues on into the corridor. The papery whisper of her ledger pages fades into the amber distance. Somewhere in the archive, far away, in a section you did not visit, a canister with a loose seal is breathing out its sound. You cannot identify it from here. It is too faint, too far, too mixed with the hum of the cables to be anything more than a texture in the air, a slight warmth of sound, the ghost of something preserved, something that was once real and vivid and is now very old and very quiet. You lean back in your chair. The wood is solid and warm beneath you. The lamp on the table burns steadily, its light falling across the open ledger in front of you, across the page of small, careful writing that a cataloger left at the end of their last shift, a page of notes about canisters in the architectural sound section, observations about the condition of seals, recommendations for maintenance. The handwriting is regular and clear, each letter formed with the same unhurried care as all the work that happens in this place. You read a line or two without taking it in. The words pass through you the way the cold air passes through the grate, present and then gone, leaving only the sensation of having passed. The floor sways. The cables hum. The smell of candle wax is warm and sweet and constant. You close the ledger gently. You rest your hands on the cover, and the cover is smooth and cool beneath your palms, and the lamp burns beside you, and the archive breathes around you in its slow and patient way. After a while, Solen appears in the doorway again. He has finished his rounds, all the lamps are lit, all the seals have been checked. all the preparations made, and he comes into the room and takes down his coat from the hook by the door, a coat different from the one he wore for his rounds, a heavier one, a coat for sitting still in the cool air of the archive on a long night. He settles into a chair at the far end of the table, not the chair nearest you, but not the farthest either, and he sets his lighting wand on the table before him and folds his hands and sits. His breathing is very steady. You watch the slight rise and fall of his chest and find that your own breathing has matched it, not deliberately, not as an effort, but simply because breathing tends to match what is around it when what is around it is steady enough and calm enough and has been going long enough. In and out, in and out. The amber light holds. The cables hum. The floor sways forward and back in the long, slow rhythm of the wind in the gorge, the rhythm of the cables holding their tension, the rhythm of this place doing what it has always done, what it will continue to do through this night and the next and the next. From somewhere in the stacks, closer than the ghost sound you heard before, there is a brief and very faint sound. A few notes, liquid and clear, repeated once, and then a pause, and then the same phrase again, slightly softer. A bird that has not been heard in living memory, singing through a loosened seal in a small canister on a swaying shelf in a section full of similar canisters, each one holding the last evidence that a particular voice ever existed. It does not last long. It fades, and the corridor is quiet again, and the cables resume their single note, and the floor resumes its sway, and the amber light holds steady in all its overlapping pools along all the aisles of the archive. A cataloger in a distant corridor turns a ledger page. The papery whisper of it reaches you, very faint, and then it is gone. And you are very comfortable now. The chair is warm beneath you. Your hands are warm on the ledger cover. The lamp burns with a steady, unhurried light. The smell of candle wax and old metal is like the smell of a place you have always known, not a place you have been before, not a specific memory, but something deeper than memory, something in the body's understanding of warmth and enclosure, and the particular comfort of being somewhere that has been cared for over a long time by people who cared about it. The floor sways. You let your eyes rest, not close, not yet, just rest. The lamp is still there when your eyes are almost closed, still warm and amber, still present. The cables hum. Solen's breathing is steady across the table. The archive works quietly around you, the catalogers moving in their patient circuits, the canisters holding their sounds, the cables holding the whole suspended structure above the gorge holding the river far below, everything holding everything else in a long, quiet chain of patient support. You are very tired, not an unpleasant tiredness, a tiredness that is the natural end of a long walk through a warm and amber place, of breathing cool air and smelling wax and metal, of listening to sounds that ask nothing of you. A tiredness that has been building since you arrived and is now simply here, present and welcome like a blanket placed over you by someone who knew you would need it. Let it come. The floor sways, forward and back, forward and back. The cables hum, one long low note, always the same note. The amber light is warm behind your closed eyes. From somewhere deep in the stacks, very deep, very far, barely a sound at all, rain on a tin roof. The particular rain, the specific rain, falling on a roof that no longer stands. Patient, unhurried, the floor sways, Solen's breathing, the papery whisper of a ledger page, the click of a glass stopper, gently checked, very far away now, the cables hum, the amber light, the sway, the rain, the hum, forward and back, forward, the bird somewhere, 3 notes, and then quiet, and then the hum, the sway, the amber,